Our US correspondent joins us. Karen Kasler is the State House Bureau Chief for Public Radio and Television in Ohio. Hello, Karen.
Hello, Jim. How are you?
Nice to talk with you. Very well, thank you. What is this rally?
Well, this is a huge motorcycle event that draws in about 700,000 people into South Dakota, which is, for those of you not familiar with American geography, it's kind of in the northern part of the middle part of the United States. Not a whole lot there, but it's near Mount Rushmore. It's an area of a lot of open space, and it brings in these motorcycle riders every year. It was last year it was considered a super spreader event. And that's what it looks like it's happening this year. And especially since South Dakota is run by a very strongly Republican governor who looks like she might try to run for president. This is, we're expecting some not so good things to happen, especially as the COVID cases are rising in the U.S.
Okay, so hundreds of thousands of them get together and congregate. And this year, the prospects for spreading as they all ride home again, Karen, could be worse.
Yeah, I mean, 700,000 people potentially at this event. You have to assume that a fair number of them have not been vaccinated. And that, of course, has been fueling what's been happening in this country and I think around the world. The unvaccinated folks are really where the COVID spread has been happening. I mean, 99% of people who are hospitalized, 99% of deaths are among people who have not been vaccinated. And of course, in the U.S., we have a fair number of people who've chosen not to be vaccinated. The vaccine is available almost to anybody who wants to get a shot, and yet there have been a large number of people, many of whom are Republicans, many of whom are likely to be at least sympathizing with the folks who are at this Sturgis motorcycle rally. And so there's a real concern on the part of public health officials and the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, and other entities that this is going to be bad, what's happening at Sturgis, and it's already bad in other parts of the United States.
Yes, something bad is going on, was the quote from your Dr. Fauci. And of the rally, I saw the headline in the Daily Beast: unvaccinated, unmasked, and coming for America. All right. So they'll all ride home again. I see that Ohio is near the top of the list for people managing to wangle a third dose of the vaccine for extra protection. More than 1 million Americans have done this, says the Newser website. And people here trying for that as well. But it's not yet recommended in the US, is it?
No, and yesterday there was a news conference late in the afternoon about people having that third dose if they are immunocompromised, or people who are, what to do if you are in that immunocompromised space. But yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of confusion here about whether a booster shot is a good idea, especially since many of us were vaccinated earlier on in the year. I mean, in Ohio, we started vaccinating the elderly back in December. We started vaccinating teachers and other people who would come into contact with kids back in March. And so there's a real question about whether is it time for us to get a little bit extra protection. And it's really kind of unclear about whether we all need that. Now, I understand that the White House has purchased enough potential vaccine for everybody who's gotten the vaccine to get that booster shot, but so far it's not been recommended.
In the Guardian newspaper this morning, the Taliban 7 miles away from Kabul now. That's being reported elsewhere as well, at least part of the Taliban. The airport is the only way out of the city, reports Canada's Globe and Mail. Karen, the Pakistan government, it's being blamed in part for the incubation and revival of the Taliban, but it asks, along with many others, where the $987 billion spent by the US on fighting and training troops and reconstruction efforts in Afghanistan went. And the postmortems on this have begun, yes?
Oh, absolutely. And it's the postmortems have been not only among, Democrats who've been concerned about President Biden making this call, but also Republicans pushing back on Biden's decision to do this. I mean, Donald Trump, who praised Biden back in April, saying that we needed to get out of Afghanistan, but the timeline was wrong. Well, now he's been out there saying if the election, in his words, wasn't rigged, which of course we know it was not, then he would be handling it entirely differently. So all of this is tied up in the politics of everything. But I think there are a lot of people who have legitimate questions about, the 2,300 Americans who have died in Afghanistan and the 20,000 who were wounded in Afghanistan since 2001. What was that all for? And I think that that's the kind of questions that people are asking as we're watching what's happening. And then there's a real concern about the Afghanis who worked with the United States during the time that we were there, and what's happening to them. We're hearing terrible reports about some of those people being captured and executed. And how can we help these people who helped us when we were over there and needed it?
What repercussions are there? Yeah, I'll get to the humanitarian side, which is the most important of all. But what repercussions are there for the Biden presidency in this? Because back in July, he made the fateful remark that the scenario we're seeing play out that you're describing was highly unlikely, and the US would never just walk away from supporting the government in Afghanistan. And now he's going to have to stand by those words because they're going to be repeated a lot back at him.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, we've got congressional elections coming up next year. These are the kind of things that are going to be talked about. And I think that this is a major foreign policy nightmare for him. I mean, the idea of ending the war in Afghanistan, I think a lot of people did support that because a lot of Americans are tired. It's been going on. It's the longest American war. So ending it was something that I think many Americans were supportive of. But the timeline of this and the way that it's been happening, the Biden administration has a lot of questions to answer. A lot of people are pretty unhappy with the way that his administration has been answering those questions. So there's a lot to be discussed here. But it's just the humanitarian crisis that's happening, especially among those who helped the United States when we were there and wanted and needed the help. That's really, I think, concerning to so many people.
And there's the potentially enormous humanitarian issue affecting women, and especially young women. Not to mention, as you say, the reprisals against men as well. And you can say, well, nothing would change if we stayed, which is what Nancy Pelosi's been saying. But the counter-argument is that while they stayed, there wasn't a tyranny. And I guess the world will see this. And it's impossible to know what will happen. But it is a major issue now for Biden's presidency, yeah?
Absolutely. I mean, it's certainly, I think, when you started to think about when he won the White House, what would be his first major foreign policy crisis? I mean, certainly what's been happening with China and the Uyghurs, that was a major foreign policy concern. Russia in general and their interference in our elections, another concern. But this has been something that's I think, kind of surprising to some people because it wasn't a major issue in the 2020 election, but obviously has become seriously, incredibly important.
The big question, I suppose, is regional stability, and the success or lack of it of those peace talks in Qatar as well. All right, so it doesn't look yet, Karen, I suppose, like America can backtrack, except maybe it can hold Kabul for a while in a West Berlin kind of situation if the Taliban do get there really quickly.
Well, and I'm seeing some reports that suggest that Kabul's going to fall very, very quickly, and that right now things are being held back. But it's a very volatile situation, and could you make the argument that we should have seen this coming, especially announcing the timeline? But what other way is there to do that? And that's the discussion amongst much smarter people than me when it comes to foreign policy is what would be the right way, if there was a right way to leave, on what timeline, in what way. And that's, again, the Biden administration has a lot of questions to answer on this.
Just while we have you, just before the news, Prince Andrew's gone to join the Queen on her annual summer break at Balmoral, and media are suggesting he's on a hiding to nothing, really, with the lawsuit being brought against him by Virginia Roberts Giuffre. What happens to him legally now in the US, do we know, with this lawsuit?
Well, it is a civil case, so it's not a criminal case, but that doesn't mean that he can just ignore it and let it go away. Civil cases can't be ignored for the most part because that can be really bad for the defendant, and that in this case it's the prince. A New York judge could be brought into this case and make sure that the defendant is served with papers, and the bottom line is this is potentially something that he's going to have to deal with, and just running away and hiding from it, if that's indeed what's happening, that can't last forever. Obviously, the fact that he's not in the United States does make it difficult for Ms. Giuffre to continue on with the case. But, there are ways to do this, and just ignoring it and hoping it goes away, I mean, that's not a realistic plan of defense.
There will be a day of reckoning. Karen, thank you very much for joining us, as always.
It's great to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Karen Kasler, our US correspondent.